Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Class for tonight. And so I am going to be reviewing episode 6, and if you have watched it then please do comment down below what your opinions were on this story, because I'm going to hopefully explain as much in detail as possible, because this episode today was very difficult to picture in my mind, because I know some of the bits, but most of the bits were quite difficult to explain. So if you haven't watched it yet, then please do watch it right now, because you will be amazed and you'll be shocked of what they have to say and what they are trying to figure out in this episode. So with my thoughts on this episode, my goodness, what brilliant performance from everybody in this episode, because although Mrs. Quill does give them detention, it does seem like kind of a boring episode at first. But what's always good about it in detention, you're always trapped in a confined space, and it's just so claustrophobic for Charlie, because he is not used to confined spaces, and he really gets, his heart beats so fast, and he almost goes into a panic mode almost, because he cannot, live within like a tight confined space, and he really does freak out and goes into panic mode, and he really does lose out on his emotions and really does get angry with everybody. And so everybody literally does get angry with each other, because this kind of stone that kind of floats through space went through this kind of crack in time, as always does this tear in space and time, goes through the crack or this tear, and then goes into the classroom where basically Charlie was going to open the door. The little thing, or this little asteroid or meteorite, I'm not sure, there's this little kind of stone kind of flew into the classroom and caused a massive explosion, and it was completely so unbelievable of just what just happened. Like, how did this, what honestly happened and caused this explosion to happen? Did somebody throw a bomb, or what happened? And just, you really just, they had no idea what just happened. But then when they kind of, looked around the classroom and saw what happened, and like, how did we even get here? And even so, when they look outside the classroom door, they can't even see their actual school anymore. It's completely darkness. No stars, no planets, no nothing. As in the story, in the middle of the story, as I think it was, who was it now? Ram. I think it was Ram who said that they are, or wherever they are right now, through that complete darkness, they're trapped between, and they're trapped outside time and space itself, and like, we're in no time, no space at all. And so that got me thinking, what does that remind me of? Where you've got two dimensions, you've got time and then you've got space, but what's in the middle of those dimensions? And that got me thinking back to Doctor Who, and what does that remind me of? It reminds me of Doom, of, I think it was the Army of Ghosts, I think that episode was, and the Doctor was explaining about the void almost, and it's almost like the gap between space and time, and the void is basically a dimension that contains absolutely nothing, emptiness, complete nothingness. And that's really where they were, completely. Like, even so, if they tried to escape, putting their hands through the complete darkness, Charlie put his hand even so through the darkness, and even so you could see his hand just coming right back out. No matter how many times they tried to go through that door, they always seem to come back into the classroom. For what reason? Why? What is this classroom for? Where are they actually now? As I said before, they're trapped in like some kind of void space containing absolutely nothingness, and they can't get even back to the school, or can't even get back to the real world, because they're trapped in such a confined space, and it's very difficult for Charlie to realize and experience this kind of stress and panic of him. And within this episode, this kind of stone, as I was talking earlier, this stone had like mystical, magical powers to make people tell the truth, almost to confess. And that got me thinking, it's a confession stone, which makes people tell the truth. Honestly, if they wanted to stop, they couldn't. They were completely forced to tell the truth. As Matthias said, like, I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. He wanted to, to stop telling the truth of, because he had so much guilt on what he had, and like explaining the whole truth about his family, of being kicked out, also loving Charlie as well. Like, I know I love you, but I'm also afraid of you, which I thought that was quite interesting. Although Matthias loves Charlie, he's also afraid of him, but he didn't really meant to confess that. I mean, the stone forced him to say that, even though if he didn't really want to say that, the stone forced him to say that. And really, what Matthias said is that I'm also afraid of you, and also what you're capable of, or what you're going to do. And really, that almost put as, a really break in between Charlie's and Matthias' relationship. And really, they do have a little confrontation, like, you really do need to listen to me. Like, I was trying to, and also they're trying to, reunite and, retain their relationship together. And so it's very difficult because they're fighting amongst themselves because of this stone, because it's making them so confessed and making them so angry and almost to hate each other, because it just really makes you, in such a confined space, in a short space, you really do lose control and you lose over your emotions. You get so angry that you want to get out of here. And within the people who are trapped with you, you almost take your anger out on them. And it's what the stone literally wants of everybody in this room. Because the stone actually is a voice of a lost prisoner who's living in a prison, but also had like a guiltiness of him that kind of made him to get into this prison, but also never to leave the prison at all. And so he's almost, well, how can I really say I don't know him. It's basically a deep, dark voice talking to them, saying, you are trapped and you will never escape. It's almost like a threat. But then when Charlie picks up that stone, you can honestly feel the kind of grief but also innocence that he has, because although he kind of, torments and kind of tolerates against everybody else because they don't know who the real prince is, because he may be a stupid prince talking about all his rules on saving his world, and though they don't really know the truth about the prince, and though he has such innocence about him, he confesses, and he confesses to the stone of what the stone was trying to tell. And honestly, the stone was lying. And though Charlie was almost like trying to break the stone in order to break the stone's confession, in order to break the prisoner's confession. And what the prisoner's confession was is that you are my murderer. And Charlie, who was the guiltiest one of them all, who actually, killed the prisoner, is now being replaced as the prisoner from the previous prisoner. I know it's difficult to understand, but if you listen to me, you may get something ahead of me. And so, as this stone just really makes you, it's forcing you to tell you the truth. And we really do listen and, experience all of the guilt that everybody has on their shoulders. And almost their confessions they're telling to everybody else. Like Tanya used to steal sweets from a shop and she's very guilty about that. Matthias got kicked out of his, family for no reason why, and he's telling us why, his relationship with Charlie. Ram's telling about how he loves April so much, but April doesn't love him back as much as he does. And so we really do see the kind of hatred, but also aggression between everybody else, fighting amongst themselves because of this so compact space. But they're trying to get out, but they just can't, because they're almost like stuck in prison, or as in the prisoner's prison almost. So really, it's a very difficult story to explain, but when you watch it, it's completely unbelievable. It's so brilliant, it even makes me want to confess myself. If I had that stone in my hand, I would literally completely confess, but also I would tell myself, who are you or what do you want? And basically they would keep telling, and they were telling the stone, or the person who was holding the stone, because although you were attached to the stone and like you couldn't let go, basically once you hold the stone, you were, you know, in death, and you can be, and then you were in control of what questions you can ask this prisoner of where they are, how could we get out, and how did they get there in the first place. And so really, I don't know how they even, you know, got to even so where they are now in like this kind of nothingness. And so I think they kind of got knocked back between the two dimensions and ended up in the void, almost containing absolute nothingness, except this prison, which contains this prisoner full of this massive guilt upon himself, that he really wants to that he takes other people with him in order for them to confess their guiltiness of their actions in the past or in their lives. And they do, you know, take it way too far. And Charlie especially, he really does take on, you know, the immense courage, and he does breaks the stone in half, and you can see around his eyelids almost blood and almost, you know, sheer pain coming out from those, and you can see the bloody nose coming through down his nose. And he really takes on so much aggression and so much pain to make the stone confess. And then the stone did, and then also basically the stone did confess to Charlie's question, and the stone said, "You are my murderer." And then honestly the kind of stone broke into pieces. But then that wasn't it. Basically the whole little bit, they kind of literally almost got Charlie by the leg and was like pulling him into the actual stone itself, because as he killed the guiltiest man, or the guiltiest prisoner, he's now it's difficult. I know it's maybe difficult to explain, but it's just when I'm talking, my words just can't get out to what I want to say. It is a very confusing story. It may be confusing for you who's new to class, but we always expect the unexpected, and we did tonight. And within this episode, they almost confessed to their lives. Otherwise, they would have had the chance of their brains being fried, as Tanya, you know, spoke to the stone of like, you know, what would happen to us, like, and they took on so much knowledge from even holding the stone, and it was so incredible to know about everybody's confession, but also how they took out their confession out on each other, and the kind of aggression that Ram had with April over to Tanya and then over to Mateus. Everybody was getting so angry at each other. They were taking out, they were having fights. Everybody was having a complete outburst of arguments, but Charlie was the only person who was calm enough to break everybody apart and to tell them that I am not just a normal prince, and I am, yes, and just he goes in such a panic mode, and he could become so forensic because he can't control himself of his panic state, and he really doesn't have any guiltiness to own and confess, because he confessed himself that he wanted to kill the Shadow King and do it for the greater good of all the Rhodians. He should have done it in the last episode, but he knew he couldn't. Although he would lose Mateus, but he would lose himself. So he confessed himself that he wanted to destroy the Shadow King, and that was his confession, his only confession. But he made the stone confess, which made the stone completely break into pieces. And really, I can't say much about this episode, but it's just where if you was locked up and slammed into a room in such tight space where you couldn't even notice that the whole world completely vanished from you, and like you were completely surrounded with complete absolute nothingness except for this stone. And what would you do if you picked up that stone? You would almost automatically confess. You had no choice but to confess your truths and your guiltiness towards that stone, because almost that stone almost thrives on the guiltiness and makes people confess to their, actions. And it's really something else, and it's really, really intense. And this story does really explain how confessions can lead to such anger, and when Tanya and everybody was holding the stones, everybody else was, asking the stones question to the person who was holding the stone in order to gain more knowledge of what's happening. Where are they? How can they get out? And really, it was so incredible because everybody was having a hard time getting along with each other, so many arguments, everybody having, a time to confess of what they've done and how this kind of linked into where they were and how they got here and how they could get back. And really, I think I think Tanya was absolutely superb in the story, in this episode, as well as everybody else. Everybody who told their confession really brought out their almost personality of them. And we also know Ram as being a bit stupider sometimes, April being not as loving as you would hope to have been to Ram, Tanya being very, as again, superb, talking about how we can defeat and how can we get out of here, and how she knew so much about the stone, and from even just holding it, she knew all of the thoughts that the stone had, and almost she wanted to have that same picture in her head, and like how could they get back, and what is that this actual stone is. And so it is very, very difficult to explain, but I hope I've done it in much detail that you can understand. But anyway, guys, also I have to mention, at the end of the story, at the end of the episode, we see Mrs. Quill destroying the kind of rock pieces, and then everybody, Tanya, April, Ram, were completely whizzed out of the classroom because they could not even stay in that classroom for even a minute. But then Mrs. Quill came over to the desk and she had this kind of blood from her eye for some reason. Like, where was she? Where did she go? And then what actually happened is that basically, I don't know if this is true, but we also saw a trailer for the next episode, and it's almost like where we get this kind of thing out of her head, and really, she really now tells Charlie that I am free of your control, I am no longer your slave, and I have my own free will back, which means I have a gun, and this time everything's going to change, which means that Charlie's not even in control of Mrs. Quill anymore. Even that, Charlie wants to, to control and Mrs. Quill's actions. Mrs. Quill can just go turn around and shoot Charlie just right now because she can, because she has the thing out of her head finally at last, which makes her so relieved and so unstressed because she has so much free will on her hands to do whatever she likes now. And so that will link into the next episode. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this very difficult but very brilliant review, because I know that it might have been difficult to explain, but I hope that I gave you so much detail and so much information about the story. But I hope you have enjoyed this story, and I hope you have enjoyed this review on the 6th episode of Class. And if you have enjoyed this episode, then please do give a like and tell me what your thoughts were about on this episode of Class. And so, I don't know what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of days. We may be doing a review on maybe maybe the top 5 animation stories for Doctor Who, including maybe the best animation that we've seen for many of the classic episodes that have been, restored from missing episodes. And so we might do that. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys very soon for my top 5 best animations of all time in Doctor Who. And so guys, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your night. See you soon.